The message wasn't meant for us. That's what made it terrifying. It slipped through deep space listening arrays at 3:17 Universal Time coordinated, buried in cosmic background radiation like a whisper lost in a hurricane. Weak, fragmented, desperate, and repeating one phrase in a mathematical pattern no natural phenomenon could fake. They found us. At first, analysts thought it was a glitch. Solar noise. Faulty equipment. Someone's career-ending mistake. But then the signal repeated from a different angle in the sky. And then again. 3 sources. Identical plea. By sunrise, every major power knew. By noon, the world's most classified telescopes turned toward Neptune's orbit. And that's when we saw it. Something had been hiding there. Not drifting. Not tumbling. Watching. A structure. Black, needle-thin, impossible to spot unless you knew exactly where to look. It reflected almost no light. No heat signature. No emissions. Just there. Like it had been part of the darkness itself. For how long? That answer shook people more than the alien signal. 312 years. We know because the object had adjusted position to maintain a perfect observational line toward Earth's orbital plane since the early 1700s. Before electricity. Before flight. Before we even knew Neptune existed. Someone had been studying us while we were still fighting wars with muskets. And now they were screaming for help. Global panic didn't happen all at once. It spread in layers. Governments denied. Then admitted. Then locked down. Fighter jets scrambled even though everyone knew jets were useless in space. Religious leaders called it judgment. Markets crashed. Hashtags exploded. But one question drowned out all the noise. If they were afraid, what the hell were they afraid of? We didn't wait long to find out. 48 hours after the first signal, the object moved. No engines. No flare. It simply decided to be somewhere else. One moment near Neptune. The next, decelerating into Earth orbit like gravity had filed a flight plan in advance. World militaries went to DEFCON levels that technically didn't exist. Nuclear submarines repositioned. Satellites armed countermeasure protocols never tested outside simulations. Every screen on Earth streamed the same image. A silver craft descending over New York City. It didn't blast through the atmosphere. It didn't burn. Air just parted. Like the laws of physics were being politely ignored. It stopped above the United Nations lawn. Hovering. Silent. No weapons fired. Because no one wanted to be the species that shot first in history's biggest misunderstanding. But fingers hovered over buttons. Entire civilizations holding their breath. 37 minutes passed. No doors opened. No signal transmitted. Just that ship, hanging there like a question we weren't ready to answer. Then every radar station on Earth went blind for half a second. When systems came back, the ship was open. A line of light cut along its surface, widening into an oval doorway. White glow spilling out. Too bright to see inside. And something stepped forward. It wasn't tall. It wasn't armored. It wasn't holding a weapon. It was limping. And behind it, space itself flickered. Like reality had been scratched open. That's when the second signal hit every device on Earth simultaneously. Stronger. Clearer. And translated automatically by systems we didn't build. Please help us. They're already here. Then the stars behind the moon went out. The stars didn't explode. They didn't dim. They simply vanished. One by one, pinpricks of light behind the moon blinked out like someone dragging a curtain across the sky. Astronomers screamed into headsets. Telescopes recalibrated. Software threw errors that had never existed before. Because space doesn't just go dark. Something was blocking it. Something big. On the UN lawn, soldiers tightened their perimeter, rifles aimed but shaking. Not from fear of the limping alien, but from the sky. Every instinct said look up. Every training manual said don't. The being took another step forward. Its skin shimmered violet under the floodlights. Slender. Frail. A chest plate cracked like porcelain. One arm hung useless. Not a warrior. Not an invader. A survivor. Commander Alina Ray didn't lower her weapon, but she did step ahead of her team. Slowly. Carefully. Like approaching a wounded animal that might bolt or bite. "Can you understand me?" she called. The alien's eyes, 6 of them, arranged in 2 gentle arcs, focused on her. A tremor passed through its frame. Then the air between them rippled, and words formed, not sound but meaning, pressing directly into the mind. "We chose you." Ray swallowed. "For what?" Behind the alien, the air above the ship bent. Light stretched like taffy. A circle of darkness, perfectly round, irised open in the sky. Not a portal. Not a wormhole. A hole. Like something had bitten space. "Because you fight for each other," the thought continued, weaker now. "Even when you shouldn't. Even when it costs you everything." Around the world, military satellites tried to scan the anomaly. Every signal that touched it disappeared. No reflection. No absorption. Just gone. The moon's surface began to distort near the edge of the black circle. Lunar dust lifted, drifting upward in slow spirals. On Earth, tides shifted. Ray's voice hardened. "Who is coming?" The alien's knees buckled. Ray caught it before it hit the ground. Up close, she could see burns along its skin, not heat burns. Something worse. As if parts of it had been erased and stitched back wrong. They do not conquer, it pushed into her mind. They remove. Entire biospheres. Entire histories. We ran. They followed. A general's voice barked over Ray's earpiece. "Commander, that thing in orbit just doubled in size." Of course it did. The alien gripped Ray's arm with surprising strength. "Your species makes monsters to fight monsters. Weapons you pray never to use. We watched. We judged you dangerous." Another pulse of gravity rolled across the planet. Glass shattered in skyscrapers. Oceans groaned. "We were right." Ray's breath hitched. "You want our weapons?" "No." A pause. A flicker of pain. "We need your soldiers." That landed heavier than any bomb. Because weapons can be handed over. But soldiers? Soldiers come with flags. With politics. With history. With grudges that don't disappear just because the enemy is bigger. Above them, the black circle pulsed, and something moved behind it. Not a ship. A shape. Like claws pressing against the other side of reality's skin. And every nuclear early warning system on Earth triggered at once, not detecting launches, but detecting targets, coordinates, millions of them, cross every continent. The alien looked up at the sky, then back at Ray. "They have begun the harvest." Every screen in the Pentagon went red. Not because missiles were inbound. Because the world had just been mapped. Cities. Power grids. Water supplies. Military bases. Hospitals. Refugee camp. Even isolated research stations in Antarctica. Each one tagged with a blinking marker, as if some unseen hand had drawn crosshairs over humanity's pulse points. No trajectory. No countdown. Just selection. In orbit, satellites started dying. Not exploding. Just winking out like candles pinched between fingers. Communications staggered. GPS drifted. Air traffic control screens filled with static. Up above the UN lawn, that wound in space widened another degree. And then the screaming started, not from the streets but from observatories. Something came through. Not ships. Organisms. They slid out of the black aperture like ink poured into water. Vast, angular silhouettes that didn't reflect light correctly. Too many edges. Too many limbs that bent in directions evolution would reject. Each one the size of a small city. They didn't fire weapons. They looked at Earth. And where their gaze passed, matter thinned. A patch of upper atmosphere peeled away in a perfect oval, revealing stars through what should have been sky. Ray's radio crackled with overlapping voices. "We're losing ionosphere integrity over the Pacific. Coastal tides rising 3 meters in 6 minutes. Solar radiation levels spiking." The alien in her arms convulsed, eyes wide. "They prepare the sieve." "Explain." Ray snapped. They strip protective layers. Magnetic field, atmosphere. Then they take what remains. Biomass, data. Culture is irrelevant. Resistance is irrelevant. On a nearby screen, live feeds showed people pointing at the sky as a second patch of atmosphere unraveled over South America. Clouds sheared apart, sucked into nothing. A colonel's voice cut in. "Ma'am, we've got authorization requests coming from every nuclear command on the planet." Ray closed her eyes for half a second. Humanity's worst weapons. Built to end each other. Now aimed at gods. She looked down at the alien. "You said we fight for each other. That's why you came." "Yes." "Then help us fight." The alien hesitated, not from fear, but from calculation. "Your weapons cannot kill them. But they can hurt them. Disrupt feeding structures. Force physical manifestation. When they anchor fully, they become vulnerable." Briefly. Coordinates. A flood of data hit global networks. Angles, frequencies, timing windows measured in heartbeat. Half the numbers didn't fit known physics. Scientists didn't argue. They translated. Across Earth, silo doors opened. Submarines rose. Bombers took off. For once, no one argued about borders. Ray watched the sky split wider, and saw one of the entities extend something like a limb toward the planet, space bending around it like fabric under a needle. "Do it," she whispered. Thousands of nuclear launches erupted in synchronized arcs, contrails clawing upward from every corner of the globe. For one insane moment, it looked like humanity had turned its entire arsenal on the heavens. The alien's grip tightened. "This is why we chose you." The missiles reached the edge of space. And the entities moved. Faster than light had any right to allow. Half the warheads vanished mid-flight, erased. But the rest? They detonated exactly where the aliens' data predicted. Not against hulls. Against the holes in reality themselves. Space screamed. And for the first time, one of the things bled. The blood wasn't red. It wasn't liquid. It was light, violent, ultraviolet brilliance spraying across vacuum like a wound in the laws of nature. Where it splattered, space warped, snapping back into shape as if reality itself had been held underwater and finally gulped air. Across the planet, people saw it. A cosmic injury. Proof the invaders could feel pain. And humanity did what humanity does when something bigger starts bleeding. We hit it again. A second wave of missiles launched. Not just nuclear now. Kinetic kill vehicles. Experimental rail platforms. Deep black projects no president had ever admitted existed. Weapons designed for peer wars, repurposed for nightmares. In orbit, one of the entities recoiled, portions of its impossible geometry collapsing inward like a dying star folding wrong. But the others adapted instantly. Structures unfolded from their bodies, lattices that caught incoming warheads and absorbed them. Energy redirected. A beam lanced downward. Not wide. Not dramatic. A surgical line of distortion slicing through the Atlantic, turning seawater into expanding vapor for hundreds of kilometers. Shockwaves rolled toward coastlines. Tsunami alerts screamed. The alien gasped in Ray's arms. "They escalate. You have angered them." "Good," Ray muttered. "Means they noticed." But she felt it too, the edge of the fight shifting. Humanity's opening punch had landed. Now the giants were swinging back. High above, a second entity began to push through the rupture fully. As it did, its outline solidified, physics forced to acknowledge its presence. That was the window. Seconds at most. Ray barked into comms. "All units, Phase 2 targeting, now." Around the world, something long buried woke up. From deserts, from mountains, from beneath oceans. Massive platforms unfolded, ground-based mass drivers built under the lie of asteroid defense. Their barrels glowed white as capacitors discharged. Tungsten rods the size of buses screamed upward at hypersonic speed. No explosives, just mass and velocity. They struck the partially manifested entity dead center. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the creature's form shuddered, and a chunk of it simply tore free, drifting as crystallized fragments that evaporated into nothing. Cheers erupted in command centers. Then died. Because the severed mass didn't fade completely. It split. Two smaller shapes twisted out of the remains, stabilizing fast. The alien made a sound Ray felt more than heard. They learned through damage. You are teaching them how to fight you. Another beam carved across Africa. A city vanished, not in fire but in absence. A perfect circular void where matter had been unmade. Ray's jaw clenched. Then we stop fighting like we always have. She looked at the alien. You studied us for centuries. All of it. The wars. The worst of us. Yes. Then you missed something. Above them, humanity's weapons paused mid-salvo, not from hesitation, but coordination. Satellites reoriented. Civilian networks rerouted. A pattern forming too complex to be random. Ray's voice dropped. We don't just build weapons. On screens worldwide, decommissioned communication arrays, research telescopes, and power grids synchronized into a single planetary scale system. We build systems. In orbit, a lattice of signals converged on the rupture, millions of phased transmissions intersecting at precise angles. The alien's eyes widened. You are not attacking. Ray watched the sky. We're closing the door. The black wound in space flickered. And the entity's shriek. The sound didn't travel through air. Tore through minds. Every human on Earth felt it at once. A pressure behind the eyes, a scream without noise. People dropped to their knees. Pilots blacked out. Crowds clutched their heads as the invaders reacted to something they hadn't expected. Resistance. Not missiles. Not bombs. A planet thinking together. The signal lattice tightened. Billions of devices, phones, satellites, radar dishes, old TV broadcast towers, repurposed in seconds. Civilian tech, military tech, academic networks, even abandoned infrastructure pulled from digital graveyards. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't firepower. It was connectivity. The aliens stared upward in awe. You are harmonizing electromagnetic noise into a phase conjugate barrier. That is not warfare. That is engineering on a species scale. Ray allowed herself one breath of grim satisfaction. We fight problems, not just enemies. In orbit, the black rupture began to contract, edges fraying like burned paper. One of the entities tried to withdraw, but the closing field distorted its path. Parts of it clipped the narrowing gap and sheared away, shedding more of that impossible light. But the largest one didn't retreat. It lunged. A limb, miles long, punched through the half-sealed wound and drove toward Earth like a spear. Atmosphere ignited around it. Shock fronts raced across continent. Brace, someone yelled. Impact never came. Instead, the limb struck an invisible surface 400 kilometers up and splintered. Not shattered. Converted. Its leading edge dissolved into cascading radiation that the global lattice absorbed and redistributed, flickering across the grid like lightning trapped in glass. Cities dimmed as power rerouted. Cars stalled. Data centers went dark. People gave their energy without knowing why. The alien trembled. You are feeding the shield with your civilization. Temporary blackout, Ray said, though she didn't know if that was true. The entity thrashed, trapped halfway through the closing breach. The other creatures converged, trying to widen the tear from their side. The planet groaned. Tides surged again. Fault lines shivered. Then something unexpected happened. A new signal appeared, originating not from Earth, from near Neptune. Another hidden station. Another observer species. Then another. And another. Dozens of faint transmissions locking onto Earth's lattice, matching phase. The aliens' eyes filled with reflected starlight. Others were watching too. Afraid to act. You showed them how. Humanity hadn't just chosen to fight. We'd chosen loudly enough that the galaxy heard. The rupture shrank faster now, foreign energies reinforcing the closure. The trapped entity writhed, half in, half out. Ray watched the sky burn and whispered, one push. All of us. Global grids surged past safe limit. Transformers blew. Sparks cascaded down transmission lines like meteor showers. With a final planetary pulse, the door slammed shut. The severed half of the invading entity remained on our side. And gravity took hold. It began to fall. The thing falling toward Earth blotted out the stars again, but this time it was dying. Its massive form tumbled, edges unraveling into streamers of that ultraviolet glow. Friction set the sky on fire as atmosphere tried, and failed, to behave normally around it. Shock waves rippled ahead of its descent, flattening clouds and expanding rings. Global tracking systems converged instantly. Projected impact zones shifted every second. Oceans. Continents. Maybe both. Ray didn't blink. Options. Silence answered her for half a breath. Then, we can't destroy it conventionally. Mass is too high. But its structure is destabilizing. If we fragment it higher, pieces will burn up. With what? Someone asked. We just used everything. Ray looked at the alien. It understood before she spoke. Our vessel. Its core is a folded singularity stabilizer. If we overload it inside the target mass, space-time shear will tear the entity apart. That ship's your only way home, Ray said. A pause. Heavy. Final. Home no longer exists. No one argued after that. The alien ship lifted from the UN lawn, silent as before, scarred hull reflecting a burning sky. Fighter jets escorted it out of instinct, not usefulness. Above, the falling corpse of a god convulsed, tendrils lashing as if still trying to reach a door that was gone. Civilian broadcasts resumed worldwide, not to calm people, but to prepare them. Emergency crews. Evacuation route. Humanity moving as one organism again. The alien craft pierced the upper atmosphere and accelerated straight into the descending mass. Final transmission came not in words, but in sensation. Gratitude, relief, and something like pride. Then the ship vanished inside the glowing wound of the creature. For 3 seconds, nothing changed. Then space folded. A sphere of distortion blossomed silently around the impact point, bending light, compressing clouds into a ring. The entity's body stretched thin, too thin, before tearing into thousands of incandescent fragments. Meteor storms lit the sky across half the planet. Most burned to ash. The rest splashed into oceans, sending towering waves but no extinction. Hours later, the skies cleared. Stars remained. Satellites, some, still functioned. Cities stood. Billions were alive. In orbit, no black wounds reopened. The invasion was over. But the silence afterward felt different than before. Not empty. Watching. Ray stood on the same UN lawn at dawn, exhausted, uniform scorched, eyes on a normal blue sky. A technician approached, holding a tablet with shaking hands. "Commander, we're receiving signals." She didn't need to ask from where. "How many?" He turned the screen. "Thousands. From every direction in space. Not cries for help. Introductions. Humanity hadn't just survived. We'd announced ourselves. And out there, civilizations that had hidden for centuries were stepping into the light, because one species, violent and compassionate and impossible, had shown the galaxy something terrifying. Hope with teeth. For 72 hours, Earth didn't celebrate. We listened. Signals poured in, structured, cautious, layered with mathematical etiquette and cultural fingerprint. Species who had hidden in dust clouds. Civilizations buried under oceans. Machine intelligences drifting between stars. All of them saying the same thing in different ways. "We saw what you did." Ray sat in a temporary command center built from what used to be a press hall. Half the world's infrastructure was limping, but one system was pristine: the planetary signal lattice. Humanity's nervous system, now tuned outward. A linguist whispered, "They're asking if the predators will come back." Ray looked at the sky. "They won't," she said. Not because she knew. Because someone had to. Behind her, physicists studied the debris captured in orbit, frozen shards of the fallen entity. Impossible materials, energy states that rewrote textbooks by existing. Proof. We hadn't imagined it. We hadn't overreacted. We'd fought something real. A new transmission overrode the rest. Familiar signal architecture. Same harmonic signature as the alien who had landed in New York. But stronger. A projection formed midair. Not a body, but a field of light shaped like one. We are what remains of the Nurethi, the presence conveyed. Our minds were distributed across the observation network. When our world fell, we endured as echoes. Ray felt a tightness in her chest. Your ambassador, the one who came here. Lives in memory. And in you. Images flashed. Centuries of watching humanity stumble, rage, create, destroy, love. All of it observed, debated, misunderstood. We believed you were too dangerous to trust. A pause. We were correct. A few people in the room exchanged uneasy looks. Then the signal continued. And that is why the galaxy now has a chance. More species joined the lattice, sharing data on the predators. Routes, patterns, ancient encounters. A picture forming. The things that harvest civilizations avoided regions where resistance was costly. They weren't gods. They were opportunists. And now? Earth was the most expensive target in the universe. Ray stepped outside as dawn broke again over New York. The lawn was scarred. The world was bruised. But people were already rebuilding barricades into shelters, aid stations into research hubs. Typical. Her comm chimed once more, civilian channel this time. A kid's voice, patched through emergency network. Are the monsters gone? Ray looked up at the sky full of ordinary, beautiful stars. For now, she said gently. And next time, they'll think twice. Because one wounded stranger had whispered a plea. And humanity had answered the only way we know how. Not with surrender. Not with fear. But with everything we had. Out there, in the dark between galaxies, something ancient recalculated risk. And quietly, it chose another direction,